is they just clamp into the vise. So the taper tube goes right in just like a hook, and then the plastic, I always like to melt the end of my tubes just so there's a ridge. If there's a ridge, then nothing can kind of fly off when you're casting with them. You just melt kind of a curl, I don't know if you can see that or not, just a curl in the tube. Okay. So it just kind of rolls back on itself. And you cut it to about how long you want the fly to be. And then all you're doing is slipping it onto the taper pin. And because it's tapered, eventually it's going to get tight. Now, you don't want to jam it too hard. You jam it too hard, it will not come off. And I've destroyed a lot of flies that way. So, jamming it on, and essentially once you have it like that, you're looking at just the shank of a hook now for tying. It's just a little bit wider, obviously. So you just have to think of that area now as just the top shank of your hook, where you would normally tie on. Now the biggest thing with tying tubes is they're really thick compared to a hook shank. I mean, if this one's not too bad, but if you tie on, you've got these crazy tubes that saltwater guys use, stainless tubes. You can see some tube flies can get really crazy in diameter. So the biggest adjustment from going from regular flies to tube flies is just thinking that you need more of everything. So you need more chenille, you need more, or a longer feather if you're going to palmer it, or basically you need more of whatever you're using. So it's always good with a tube fly just to leave, you need to leave that little gap in the back. Usually about, you know, 1/8 of an inch or a little more. And the reason we leave that gap is we're going to be putting, you need that little extra end to attach your junction to, which is going to have the hook on it. And I'll show you that in just a second. So I'm just going to tie that same fly you guys saw there. Just a simple General Practitioner.
Quickly before you get too far along, what thread are you using?
Sorry?
You're not using 8/0 thread?
No, it's not 8/0 thread. It's I think it's 3/0. I'm not even sure, to be honest. It's a little bit thicker anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing nice about tube flies, especially doing for steelhead and salmon. You're not dealing with size 22 hooks or 18 hooks and tiny stuff like that. And it's I like it a little bit bigger anyway. Okay, so just throwing on a bucktail tail, just like you would on a regular General Practitioner. Hey, and the best thing is with these taper pins is you can spin it a little bit on the pin, so to get the other side. And this style is called tying in the round, which just means that you're instead of having a tail that comes up from the shank, you're basically tying it around the entire tube. And I'll be honest, most of my tube flies are usually tied in the round like this. Just throw a little tinsel in the back, or crystal flash. So here's where you have to now start thinking about, you need bigger material. So if you had a regular size 2 hook and you were doing a General Practitioner, you don't need very much material with the chenille. Here you're gonna, you know, pull off way more than you normally would. And that's the biggest thing I know when I started tying tubes is, you know, the first dozen at least, halfway I'd run out of stuff, run out of materials, just because you're wrapping that big diameter. Same thing with any feather that's going on there, like this orange slopping. It's you want to get a nice long one so that you can go around that at least 5 or 6 times. But you can see, you know, the actual tying part isn't much different once you get it secured in the vise. Your biggest frustration if you start tying tubes is when your tube starts to spin. Okay? And that's all the emails we get, all the phone calls we get from guys that are starting out. It's always, that's the #1 concern, is the spinning tube, and it'll drive you crazy. So that's where it's the fine art of kind of wedging it on there so it'll come off, but making sure it's still on there. Okay, so we'll just wind forward. Now the other thing with tubes too, there are some guys that pre-melt the front of their tube also. I like to wait till after, because sometimes you don't really know where a fly is going to end. With a hook you don't have the advantage of kind of ending where you want. There's the end of the hook and that's it. With tubes you can kind of leave it open, I guess you could say. It's just winding forward like you would on a normal hook, and you can see how big the diameter gets now. And a lot of guys like this for salmon and steelhead too, is the fatter profile of of the actual pattern. Okay, and we'll palmer this forward. And another mistake, or not a mistake, but just something you have to kind of get used to, and I know when I started tying flies when I was about this guy's age, on regular hooks, is you've always got that age-old problem of you running out of space, right? So to make sure you really...
You do a thing like that.
What's that? Yeah, and you have to remember too, you still have to melt this, so you still need a little bit more for it to roll back, so even more than a hook, you're going to leave a big space for a head. Just throw some more flash on it. A lot of steelhead guys in the room here? Or are we mostly local? Locals?
I used to.
Used to? Hey, so I mean, you can see it's as far as the actual tying goes, there's nothing much different than actual hooks. Once you get over the getting it in the vise and worrying about how much material you need. Tell you, after the Christmas break, it's been a while since I've tied a fly. Hey, and one complaint we often hear about tube flies is quite often guys get very held up with the size of the head. I mean, you can see proportionally the head's not bad with the size of this fly. But especially when you start going into using those, like the crazy tubes I was showing you, if you go into the bigger metal tubes and things like that, you can end up with really big heads. I haven't noticed the difference with the fish, but as actually, I mean, when the look of your fly, it definitely looks different than something that's on a hook. I guess we finish it however you finish your regular flies. Now you need to pull it off. Here's the tricky part. It's actually not that tricky. It's best to push from the back though. If you pull from the front, you can pull some of the stuff off. Right, so you pull, stick that back in. Now I've got a little too much tube left, because you only want it to roll back. It's probably between 1 and 2 millimeters. It's not a lot, so I'll just trim that. And then it's just rolling it against an open flame. And what I do when I'm at home tying, I'll have a little, you know, those little alcohol lamps you can get where they don't have any odor or anything like that, just so you don't stink up your fly room. Okay. Anything plastic, you burn it too long or you get it too close, it goes black. So some of yours will be black, okay, but you end up with a head that's rolled back on itself. Now that rolling back is really important because again, if you think about a regular hook and you're casting a hook through the air and there's nothing on the front, there's no ring on it or eye to hold that material there, it definitely is going to fall apart way faster. So by tying both of those, or melting both of those heads in, or those ridges in, just kind of keeps things on better.
Did you put head cement on that?
Oh yeah, I sure do. Yeah. Hey, so there's the tube fly. I'll just stick it back in the vise. Now you're probably wondering how the hook thing works. Hey, so there's lots of styles of hooks. Now this type of tube that we've used is just called Scandinavian plastic tubing, just a fancy name for plastic tube. It's nice and convenient because you can actually, if the hook's not terribly big, like a size 2 or smaller, you can actually get the hook right into the tube fly, the back of the tube fly. So I'm just going to show you on a bare tube. So we'll pretend this is, I'll get one the same length here. There we go. So I'll show you in a bare tube just because it makes more sense. If we think of this being the front of the fly, so something like that. Okay. The hook, basically what you're doing is you're passing your line through the actual tube, and then you tie on your hook normally, just whatever knot you use, whatever one you like. And because of this type of tubing, the hook will go right into the back of this stuff. Okay. So it looks goofy now because there's no line, of course, but when the line goes through, you've got your knot, you pull everything tight, and the hook just wedges in the back. Now, you don't want to wedge the hook in too far. You wedge it in too far, it won't dislodge when you catch a fish, because that's another benefit of tube flies is when you catch a fish, I'd say 3/4 of the time, maybe more, the pattern actually dislodges from the hook, but of course you still got your line on the hook. This kind of just slides up, and you end up saving a lot of flies from the teeth of the fish.